Hello and welcome once again to Superconnectivity. I'm your host, Charlie, the Professor Esser, and with me as always is...
Phil, me, and Parrish.
Hey, Phil. Now, we had a very, very, very long all-new Marvel roundup.
Yes.
And there's not that much news to get to this week in the world of Marvel or comic books in general. There are some things I want to get to. First thing I want to get to, because I do think this is important. I don't want to get too political, although it is a political bit. Did you see about the Riri Williams Invincible Iron Man cover?
Yes, I think, I'd mention that to you. It's one of the variant covers. Who was it? J. Scott Campbell, maybe, and who's known for drawing sexualized versions of women. Yes.
Yes, but of course the character is supposed to be 15. Now, there is this really complex issue here. And I do think there it is complex. And I think that sometimes things get shouted down without giving due reference to the complexity. But again, there is this, here's the thing. They were saying, well, this is a girl who doesn't look like a 15-year-old girl. Well, I used to be a 15-year-old boy, and I will say some 15-year-old girls did look really, really, really adult.
That's what I was gonna say. There are some 15-year-old girls, some don't, but some do have like the body of a grown woman. Yes.
But granted, Riri was not one of those girls in any of the ways we've ever seen her before. So it was a very out of character take on Riri, and in that case, they were absolutely correct.
Plus, I was gonna say, I think I saw someone even mention that I don't know if it's been proven, but someone thought that they had even maybe lightened her a shade or two since her very first appearance.
Oh, well, I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, I don't think that's necessarily the. Here's what I'm going to say: coloring in comic books does vary.
Artist interpretation, yeah. Yeah,
artist interpretation, and so that colorist may have gone that way, or it could have even just been the way that the cover was lit when they made the rendering. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to put too much of worry on that. She was still clearly an African American woman. There was no shortage of that. She's always had the big hair, and the big hair I think is much more of a question, because it's like Captain America's shield fitting under his jacket. It's like, how are you getting all that hair in the helmet? But but it's comic book physics. But they did make her very. It was essentially the point was that it was a very sexy. It was a very sexy cover for the character. Now it's the international. It's the Invincible Iron Man cover. It tends to be sexy, and it is this. There's this real conflict when you talk about images of women in comics, and it doesn't help that it's a large number of males drawing. Mm-hmm. But the fact of the matter is that there are women artists who will draw very sexy images as well, because people like sexy images. Now, is it appropriate for a kid that's supposed to be a teenager to have their image made that sexy? Maybe not, especially if the character is not very sexy. But here's what I'm going to say, and this is what I think is the real credit of this whole story, is that Marvel pulled the cover. Mm-hmm. And this is one of these things that I think is what I like about Marvel right now. Because Marvel is still a company run by largely, white males running their show. And, they're going to make dumb white male mistakes. They're going to make these choices that look good at the moment. It's like, oh, that's a real cool cover. I love the way you drew her. She's so, she's so fierce and powerful. And that's the thing. Is like one of the reasons why women are often drawn sexy is because often that sexiness is a form of power. What makes them sexy is that they're standing taller than you. Their legs are spread, their arms are out. They're making an aggressive stance, which can often seem very sexy because, of course, a woman being aggressive is both very sexual, especially to the male gaze, because the idea of a woman coming to you, which of course never happens in the wild, is impressive to men. And so when a man wants to draw, how do I draw this woman strong? They think, I'll draw her standing over me. But of course, if she's standing over me, you're also looking up at her. So if you're looking up at her, then you're seeing all her fun bits, So it is this conflict of the male gaze, where even when we're trying to do what we think might be the best idea to show someone being strong and powerful, we actually wind up, dehumanizing them in a completely different way. And that is something that you have to watch out with characters of color, with female characters, especially when you have males making the decisions. But to their credit, Marvel said, okay, we are bad, and they pulled it, because they realized it was their bad. They said, yeah, it is kind of weird. It is a 15-year-old kid. Maybe we shouldn't be sexualizing her. And yeah, sexualized covers are the standard in the industry, but maybe that's not the best idea. And there were and they basically showed, look, the rest of the book isn't like that at all. It was one variant cover that we threw out there because, here's a popular artist. Here's an artist who does a lot of popular covers of women. Let's let him do one for our new female character, and to what it's worth, she's fully clothed. And like I said, I think the sexuality of it has more to do with how developed she's being drawn, more than, and the fact that she is in an aggressive stance, more than necessarily anything about it. This wasn't a. I mean, there are people who are going to say, her back is too long, and too much midriff is showing for what her size should be, and these are, the anatomy. Jack Kirby often drew people with the same arm on both sides, so they have like two left arms or two left. Anatomy was never the strong suit of most comic book artists. It has to do with having to draw a lot of them all the time. Draw a lot really quickly. You don't always have the best sense of anatomy, but in this case, that's. There are a lot of things you can do if you really want to get nitpicky about it. But at the end of the day, Marvel just said, not worth the fight. We don't want that standing in the way of the story we're trying to tell. What we want to tell is this great story about Riri Williams, this great story about this 15-year-old genius girl who becomes the new Iron Man. That's the story we want to tell. We don't want this story to be about, we're drawing sexy girls. It's like, yeah, there are going to be sexy girls in comics. Sorry. And yeah, some of them might not be appropriately drawn because, let's face it, comic book artists don't know how to draw people who are not Olympian ideals. We can draw Agatha Harkness and we can draw Pamela Anderson. We didn't do a lot of drawing, middle-aged mom. That was not one of the things we ever did. And so when you get to a Sharon Carter, it's going to take some refinement to get to where you want it to be, because you have to take the criticism. And for what it's worth, Marvel takes the criticism. They take the criticism because it's not about their ego; it's about the business. It's about correcting when they make a mistake. And to that extent, you got to say, hey, bravo, Marvel. Be better if you didn't make the mistakes. But, we all make mistakes. So good that they pulled the cover. Good that they released the interior art. And good that they said this is about Riri and her story, not about the artwork. So that's a good thing. Along those same lines, there was an interesting backlash at the UN this month. Did you hear about this? And this is not Marvel per se. But it does make for an interesting political debate. Did you hear what happened at the UN?
I don't know if I did. No, what happened?
Oh, well, basically you had heard that there was this big declaration that Wonder Woman was going to be a goodwill ambassador for the UN as part of Women in Power. And there was a big backlash against that by women who said, first off, a large-breasted woman in a red, white, and blue one piece, maybe a large-breasted white woman in a red, white, and blue one piece, maybe is not the best image for women's empowerment across the world. Also, she's a fictional character, so she's not an actual ambassador. And they declared her. They didn't call her an honorary ambassador; they called her an actual ambassador. And for what it's worth, the UN had just rejected, there was a big push to have the new Secretary General of the UN be one of these very qualified women, and they skipped them over. And so it's like when they had the opportunity to empower an actual woman, they instead, selected a cartoon woman in a bikini. And, it's a very complex issue for a lot of people in the nerd community, especially women nerds, women comic book fans who, of course, have always idolized Wonder Woman and do love her and do think that it's a great respect to give to Wonder Woman, but at the same time go, yeah, you're right. It would have been better had they had declared Linda Carter or Gal Gadot a UN ambassador at the time of Goodwill, alongside Wonder Woman or something like that. Also, the fact that it's kind of this big plug for a movie that's coming out, it's a little it cheapens the UN a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know how much Warner donated for that. But it gets into this idea about how when you have any institution, and this is the thing about privilege when we discuss privilege, and just because we barely talked about politics and privilege last week, so let's talk a little politics and privilege. What privilege is, and it's everyone says, oh, you're just saying we're all this or that. It's like, yeah, but it's not necessarily saying that you're that way aggressively. It's not like making these active choices. It's that when you make a boneheaded decision, you don't realize it.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you get upset when someone calls you on it, that's when you're making the active choice. And that's what crosses it from being just, idiot privilege to being, no, now you're being aggressively misogynistic, or now you're being aggressively racist or whatever. Because, we've said, look, this is where you made this mistake. You made this 15-year-old girl look like, a sex bombshell.
Mm-hmm.
You made a fictional woman an ambassador when you didn't do anything to actually help any real live women. You also picked a woman who is in many ways a sexual fantasy, which she was. I mean, there's no denying that was, he again, because of course the creator of Wonder Woman very big into Amazonian power and that idea of physical aggressiveness as a sexual trait. It is a sex fantasy character created by men, and so that you have to take these things in these larger contexts, and you have to try and do better. The UN has to try to do better. Marvel has to try to do better. Marvel is trying to do better at the moment. I don't know if the UN is trying to do better. Okay. Do you have any thoughts on the politics of everything before we move on from politics, Phil? Do you have any thoughts on any of this?
Just to play devil's advocate, I was thinking Wonder Woman, I mean, yeah, she's a fictional character, but that might make her like a better ambassador just because she's not a real person, so you're not going to get any real scandal from Wonder Woman. And as a fictional character, she's not one person. She's like this collective of people who have added to her mythos for decades. So it's kind of like the thing about bringing people together, but
yeah.
I don't know.
You're told you can even make an argument when you talk about whether or not she's a white woman.
Yeah.
Because the Amazonians, first off, they're Mediterranean.
Yeah, she's not from America.
Yeah, you could even argue that they are, like most Mediterranean, Arabic influenced cultures. You could have that played up, and that I think is where you can even it's Greek culture, but Greek culture is highly influential throughout all of the Mediterranean culture, the Mesopotamian culture, the Macedonian culture.
Well,
these things were all. This is all one big group of people who all hung out together, I
mean, if you want to get really technical, she comes from Paradise Island, which is a fictional place. So that could even make her an even better UN ambassador because she belongs to no real country, in the real world. So. Oh yeah,
and you can even easily make the Kryptonian argument, which is that Superman's not actually a white guy; he's Kryptonian.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, and then the counter argument is, yeah, but you always draw him peach,
Yeah.
It's like when everyone say, well, actually, the pink Kree are the minority on Kree, and so really, when we have the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Captain Marvel, he's actually, to the Kree themselves, he's almost a black man. It's like it doesn't really sell as well as you think it is right now, kids.
If you don't want to do Superman or Wonder Woman, do Martian Manhunter. He's not even from this planet.
Yeah, but then you're not empowering women. You have to do Martian Girl Hunter or whatever her name is.
Oh, Miss Martian, yeah.
Miss Martian. There we go. Ms. got to do the MZ or MS, not MISS. Yeah, so I mean that's the question with with that. I mean, yeah, I mean, there's certainly a devil's advocate argument to be made. And honestly, I don't think anyone was that mad about Wonder Woman. It just because, here's the thing is like, and here's the thing to understand. Anytime you get movies, oh, why are they protesting this thing? This is just something that gives me pleasure. Mm-hmm. It's like, yes, we understand that this is something that gives you pleasure. And this is something that you think is harmless. And largely it is. Making Wonder Woman a goodwill ambassador to the UN is about as harmless of a thing you could do. But it allowed people, by pointing out the hypocrisy of it, to draw attention to it. So anytime someone is raising these issues, it's important not to dwell on what the individual qualities of that case are, but what the larger context is. So, for example, I mean, when you look at like Black Lives Matter, and then all of a sudden people start, oh, this guy that you were so upset because he got shot, well, do know he did this, and he was actually a bad person, and, yada, 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 And, that's not the point. That's not the point. It's like, yes, maybe this guy was a bad person. Not everyone who has been victims of brutality and violence was a bad person. Mm-hmm. And everybody has something in their past that maybe they don't want to be put out there, And if you're putting it out there, that maybe not is that is missing the point of what the whole scene was,
Yeah, just ask Billy Bush about those mistakes that come back to haunt you.
Yeah. Well, and like along those lines, there was a lot of backlash recently for the new Rocky Horror Picture Show on Fox that aired last night. And to be honest with you, I can see why. It was not a well-produced version of the film. It had a lot of stagecraft problems that I think, just choices were made in the choreography and the pacing that just they were not strong. But there were also people that were upset about the fact that you had Laverne Cox, who is trans, playing Frankenfurter rather than a man playing Frankenfurter. As a clearly pansexual male. But I actually think that there's some value to that as well, because I actually think that having Laverne Cox, who is a known trans artist, that even, yes, you're calling her female and treating her as female and presenting as female, she is also trans. Mm-hmm. And we're in a world now where, trans people need to be acknowledged. And I think trying to say trans people are just what their expression is, I think kind of is a way to almost minimize the difficulty of that transition. I think that it can kind of be saying, it isn't to say that, Laverne Cox isn't a woman, because Laverne Cox is a woman, but to say she's a woman and that's the only way that she can be seen is to ignore the struggle that she went through in being her true self as a woman. And I think that I think that there is something to be said in there. I love the Rocky Horror Picture Show. As a young man, as a young, geeky, weird nerd kid, the Rocky Horror Picture Show was a powerful moment for me, because it's like the first time that you were exposed in a positive way to notions of gender, notions of sexual expression that were so far outside of the norm. And to that extent, the fact that, the anti-hero of it, Dr. Frankenfurter, is then hated for that, even by his own people. It actually has a deeper message. And I think that in our modern era, you can't have, when you go to the Rocky Horror Picture Show, there's a lot there's a lot of the things that the audience says that is very homophobic, very misogynistic, very anti-sex. And in this thing that is very sexually liberating, there's also this aspect of it that is also very anti that. And, when you come to this modern interpretation, I think it comes from our way our world is informed today, in which the issue isn't whether or not there's a gay man there, but that actually that trans person who is, in expressing who they are, is actually somehow thwarting our understanding of things, pushing us farther, I think, is actually a lot more powerful. And I think that the final scene with Dr. Scott, telling Riff Raff he did right to kill these people, and killing Eddie is probably for the best too, basically showing that idea of the oppression of society, saying, yeah, it's okay, these people weren't really human anyway. I think it has all the more power in that sense. but it wasn't a well-produced show, and so there's an artistic criticism you can make, but I think that there's that there's a quality art criticism you can make, but I think that actually as a piece of art, I think it actually does carry through for a modern era. And like I said, it was a very G-rated version of Rocky Horror Picture Show, so I think it's going to wind up being a holiday classic. I know my kids enjoyed it. They loved all that music. Anyway, let's talk comic books for a minute, shall we, Phil?
Okay.
Okay, so as you know, Marvel hates the X-Men, hates all the mutant books, so they're never making any more mutant books, right, Phil?
Oh no, not so. Not there.
Yeah, so we have got an entire new line of X books. We've got 2 new team books. So we were wrong. There were going to be team books. It's not getting rid of team books. We've got X-Men Yellow and X-Men Blue, in addition to Generation X, which is colored green. And then you also have a Jean Grey book, an Iceman book, a Weapon X book, and a Cable book. So I think that's 8 books. 8 Marvel books, 8 Marvel mutant books that are launching in September. And we don't have a lot of information on these except for their covers, which are, as they said, very color coded, and it's a very interesting piece we're doing. And clearly, the mutants are still very much a part of the Marvel universe. And again, Death of X is big. We're doing the second big X-Men centered massive arc. And it does raise this question: why does everyone keep on saying that Marvel doesn't like their mutant books?
I think just for the last couple years, it's just been like, it seems like, more and more has been peeped on the X-Men, the whole, like we were talking in All New Marvel Roundup, old Cyclops is just crazy, and the whole Terrigen thing killing, not too long ago, didn't they say that there was a edict that came down that they weren't going to create any new mutant characters because then they'd have to share the rights with Fox. So they limited their numbers and...
Yeah, except then they didn't do that, and then they had the Phoenix Force return all the mutants. So, I mean, that's the thing. It's like everyone says these, and I think what happens is that something gets said in a meeting, and I think what happened was Perlmutter said, "Why are we pushing all this X-Men stuff?" Because there's always there's a ton of X-Men because it's one of their biggest sellers, and it's always been one of their biggest sellers. And he said, "Why are we pushing all this X-Men stuff? I don't want us to push X-Men stuff. We don't own the rights to the X-Men." And then someone pointed out to Perlmutter, "Actually, we do own the rights to the X-Men. We just don't own the movie rights to the X-Men, X-Men cartoons, X-Men T-shirts. That's why we push all this stuff, because they're real popular. We make a bum load of money off of it all." Everyone said, "Oh, that's right, because we make millions of dollars off of them. That's fine. Please continue with the X-Men." And they do other things because after a while, the fact of the matter is the problem with the mutants is that every time you make more mutants, you have this question: well, when are the mutants going to be the dominant species? Because it's like, oh, we're the survival of the fittest. We're the next step in evolution. It's like, well, you should get there by now.
Well, I mean, between Terrigen Clouds and Scarlet Witches saying no more mutants, I mean, they've been through some, legacy viruses.
Yeah, but they get all the best arcs. That's the point, is that they kept on getting all the best arcs. They were getting all these great storylines that are being fed right to the mutants because that's what people wanted. People wanted these great, great stories. Sorry, that's the Gamma Cast person just text me saying when we're starting, so I have to. Too many things. Yeah, but but that's the thing. Is like everything. It continues on as it does, and like I said, I just think that there's this effort in Marvel to say, there's this effort of this fan to try and find fault in things, to try and tear things down. And the fact of the matter is, there is not a lot to tear down. These are good shows, good books that are going to keep on continuing, and Marvel isn't going to get rid of them anytime soon. And I'm glad that we're getting more mutant books. And I think that after AVX, they're actually going to have a resolution to this whole Mpox thing. Because I think, as we know, Beast is going to find the cure, because Beast is sitting there working on a cure. That's why he's still with the Inhumans, because he's like, oh, well, the Inhumans have all the data, so let me work with them, And I'm the guy who knows about the X gene, because I'm the world's leader on it. And you may have him teaming up with Young Beast at some point, and they're going to have a nice little quasi mystical cure for it. And, that'll fit right in with the new Death of Magic and Return of Magic and Blood in the Ether and the new Doctor Strange movie coming out. So, they're making their bones on all this. And I think it's important to recognize that Marvel at the end of the day is a business. And, and speaking of business, did you hear the latest over at DC? Did you hear who's trying to buy DC today?
No, who?
AT&T.
What?
AT&T is putting in a bid for Warner Brothers.
Oh.
The whole kit and caboodle. And Time Warner under AT&T. And that's a game changer for DC. Now, Disney was looking at Netflix, but Disney might have to step up their game because they don't have the lines. So we're going to have to see who goes next. But okay.
Come on, Disney, buy DC. Then we can all these characters can intermingle. Come on.
No. Disney is never going to buy DC because why would why would anyone sell DC? That's their icons. This is how they make their money. It's like,
Charlie.
I'm just telling you, Disney is not going to buy DC. It's not going to happen. Yes. First off, because Disney already has a stable of comic book characters to put into movies. They don't need to buy DC.
Yeah. Well, forget the movies, but it'll cost a unprecedented amount of money, but it would be worth it. I mean, just from the merchandising alone, if one company has all the Marvel and DC characters.
Yeah. Well, you might actually wind up with a actual monopoly violation there.
Oh, yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Yeah, Dark Horse isn't that big. It's going to be hard for Marvel to argue, Dark Horse has a huge bit of the superhero market. Yeah. Not likely. And you know how much we'd be paying for comic books if Marvel owned DC? Yeah, trust me. We don't want one company owning all the superhero books. Trust me.
Batman on 20 Avengers teams.
Yes. Okay, so I think that's enough Super Connections for 1 week. Phil, what do you think?
Yeah, we got a lot of topics here.
Okay, so Phil, if they would like to catch up with you, talk to you about all the wonders of Phil Parrish and how awesome he is, where can they do that?
If you would like the large list of all the podcasts Charlie Esser is on, you could always email me, nightwingpdp@gmail.com, and on Twitter, I am @nightwingpdp.
Okay, and of course on the emails, in that way that Mom and Pop used to talk to one another back in the glory days of the 20th century, you can write to me at superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog, all one word, @gmail.com. And of course, you can always follow me on the Twitters as I live tweet Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or The Incredible Hulk on MeTV, 7 o'clock Saturdays, and of course, Legends of Tomorrow @Charlie Esser. That's CharlieEsser. Look for the 2 E's in the middle for quality. Thank you for connecting with us, ladies and gentlemen. Please connect with us again. Good night.
Good night, everyone.